This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Today is our first Deconversion Anonymous episode. These are the episodes where people like you get to tell their stories of faith transitions. What I've found since my own deconversion is there's something deeply cathartic about telling your story. These stories help give hope to those who are currently in the middle of their doubt and who are worried about what it all might mean if they admit to themselves they no longer believe. Remember, deconversion stories are our origin stories. If you would like to tell your story on the podcast, please get in touch with me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at gracefulatheist. I do need to ask your patience about audio quality. You're going to notice a dramatic difference between this introduction and my mic in particular in the interview. I had a terrible mic for the first two episodes, and I'm just asking that you will focus on the content and not the early poor quality. Hopefully things will get better now that I have a better mic. Today I talked to Susan from Scotland. She described her childhood growing up asking the big questions to the church leaders around her. She was never satisfied with the answer she was given. She also had a sense of empathy for others that was not always present in the believers at church. This led to questions, which led to, well, let's let her tell the story. Hello, Susan, and welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you.
All right. This is a Deconversion Anonymous show, so you can tell us as little or as much as you want to, but just briefly tell us about yourself and why you want to tell your story.
So I'm from Scotland. Obviously, you can hear by my accent. I'm originally from the Highlands, but I now live in quite a sort of populous area in the central belt of Scotland. I'm 40 years old, and I come to deconversion kind of probably in my 20s.
Okay.
But kind of still feeling a little bit the backlash 20 years later, believe it or not.
Wow.
So yeah, not major backlash anymore, but still sort of strange comments and family members sort of looking at you in a different way now that you're not religious, like you're some kind of evil person.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just also, I think it's important to get sort of different points of view, and obviously I'll listen to other podcasts with people, their stories as well, how they get through it, how they speak to folk, and what questions that they get answered basically in this process too.
Absolutely, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to start gathering these stories, is I think as for those people who are out there who may be just in the beginnings of their doubts, or they have just discovered that they no longer believe, it can be a really isolating feeling, and if they can hear people like yourself tell their stories, I think it can be very comforting. Yeah. Well, just one thing I do want to point out that is a kind of a theme of the podcast, and that is rather than making a bunch of intellectual arguments about the existence or lack of existence of God, the goal that I'm trying to capture is honesty. Is like, I want to have, rather than an intellectual contest, I want to have an honesty contest. So in light of that, I just want to hear your story, and let's just start with, what is your religious background? What's your religious tradition? And tell me about growing up or whenever you became.
Yeah, so it's pretty much from when I was really small. Half the family are free church, free Presbyterian.
Okay.
So they're Calvinists. The other half are kind of the wishy-washy Church of Scotland, kind of.
Okay.
They're not too bad, but so we were put towards the free Presbyterian side, and it's all very thou shalt not, women know your place, very misogynistic. I was quite a strong little character from quite a young age, and I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
And as I'm sort of, getting older, I think the way I was, maybe a little bit of a tomboy. Yeah, so basically, free church. It's really quite strong in the north of Scotland. It's probably about the main religion. I hadn't really been exposed to many other religions until about the age of 16, bar Church of Scotland.
Okay. So you mentioned there was a lot of thou shalt not. Would you characterize it as a conservative, theologically conservative, maybe even politically conservative?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much right wing. A lot of the elders in the church held quite right wing views, just generally.
Okay.
Not religious as well. So.
All right, and so you grew up in that. You kind of just remember. Do you remember making a decision at any point that you were going to be a Christian or that you were going to accept Presbyterianism?
No, not really. I was just told to go.
Yeah.
And the strange thing as well is my parents both worked, so they didn't always go. And certainly my father's side of the family that were Church of Scotland never went to the church that we went to. So I'm not really sure why myself and my brother were kind of put in that position. It was just foisted upon us, if you like.
Interesting. Okay. All right. And what began to cause you to question what you grew up with?
Pretty much the thou shalt not philosophy, because I was always asking why. I was quite curious. I mean, there was family friends that weren't particularly religious, and I recall one time when I was probably about 7 or 8, and I was really into astronomy. And this guy was a long distance lorry driver, so he took myself and his son on an overnight trip. And his son fell asleep in the back of the lorry, but I stayed awake. And he was pointing out stars, and I was asking all about, basically the cosmos and things like that.
Right.
And then I went back to church, and you try to ask the same sort of questions, and they're like, just because it is, go and read this section in the Bible. And I would find sort of strange little things, like the story of Job troubled me quite a lot, gave me nightmares.
Right.
Lot, the pillars of salt, just
Yeah.
little things like that stick in my mind. I thought, that's not very nice. I don't know if I like this religion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is amazing when you go back and you go through it at the time, but also when you look back in hindsight and you read some of the biblical stories. If you take them at its word, right, rather than playing theological games with it, it can be horrifying, some of those stories, right? And especially I think for children, if you're experiencing that when you're young, you don't have the world experience to recognize that this is, maybe it's metaphorical or not true.
Yeah, fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how do you identify now? Do you call yourself an agnostic, a humanist, an atheist?
Yeah, humanist probably first and foremost.
Okay.
I really like a lot of what they do. I follow Andrew Copson of the British Humanist Society on Twitter and follow quite a lot of the stuff that they do. Agnostic atheist probably.
Okay.
I like to sit on the fence a lot of things. I mean, I've come to my atheism obviously over the last 20 years, and I flipped and flopped in my 20s about it, going, oh, do I really want to do this? But it feels like a weight off now. So yeah.
Interesting. And so you say you were going back and forth during your 20s. What kind of solidified for you to make that decision?
Just the kind of support from religious people. They're like, well, God's testing you, and I'm like, really though?
Yeah.
It was so wishy-washy. And then I went there's cousins that have got a mother that's in the Baptist church, so I went along to some of those services, and they were speaking in tongues and things like that, which I'd never been exposed to before. And I was sort of, putting my point across that I was having doubts and things, and you just need to let yourself be filled with the Spirit of the Lord and all these things. And I just, I'm quite a reserved sort of person. I'm going, what are they even talking about? That's embarrassing, And to me, it was just all these people rolling about on the floor, just making noises and babbling. I mean, at that point, I was at university. I was working as a bouncer, and I'd seen people behaving like that when they were under the influence of alcohol and drugs. So
right.
it didn't really make sense of it,
Yeah, interesting. That can be definitely, I think when you go from one particular, even within Christianity, one tradition to another, it can seem incredibly foreign and quite wild.
Yeah. And even the Free Church, when I spoke to them, they weren't really much help. They were like, well, you just need to pray harder, or you just need to, live your life better. But they weren't leading by example. They weren't nice people. They were, you know, they would dress up on a Sunday and then they would, you know, pass homeless people or talk about people who were alcoholics, you know, unkindly and things like that.
Right.
Like, you know, so when I was a child, I accepted Christians were kind and took it at face value. But as I'm getting older, I could see that, you know, there's a lot of them quite mean. And yeah, I know that goes for the general population as well. But, you know, they're extolling Christian virtues, and they certainly weren't, you know, practicing what they were preaching.
Right. Right. What is it about humanism that you now find meaningful?
I just think it's quite compelling. I mean, it's just, you know, the central message is just be kind to your fellow man. And they don't say, oh, you know, you can't be kind to people who are religious as well, you know,
Right.
which I've been accused of. Like, oh, well, you know, you obviously look at me like I'm stupid because I'm religious. Well, no, I don't. That's your own business. I'm not going to persuade you one way or another. I came to my own conclusions, and, you know, you do the same. So yeah, it's just quite a kind of Zen philosophy. I know that's kind of mixing religions there, but yeah, it's kind of like the way I am politically as well. It's quite a liberal centre philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things I find attractive is the you know, live and let live, right? You take responsibility for your own morality, and you assume and grant that other people take responsibility for their morality. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to kind of, you know, what led you to start questioning. What would you say was the root cause of the doubts and the questions? Do you think it was moral, intellectual, emotional, or something else?
I think it was moral, first of all, because I just started when I was a child noticing a lot of things that were happening that were bad. People weren't treating each other with kindness. Oh, you do that, you'll go to hell. Teachers very quick-tempered with you if you did something that they didn't want. Not like in school, you know, where they were actually trained to be teachers. You had these Sunday school teachers that were coming in, and it would be whoever's wife or husband of an elder. Tend not to be the elders, but it used to be their spouses that would come in. And yeah, they were quite unkind to people. There was one particular instance that I remember. There was a girl, Zoe, and later on we found out she was dyslexic. She was having problem copying. It was like the Lord's Prayer or something like that. Oh, you stupid girl, you know.
Oh my.
Can't you do it? How many times do we have to show you? And just things like that, you know, there wasn't any compassion there. Later on, it started to be intellectual. As we sort of moved up to the age of 12, we joined a Bible study group. So we weren't at Sunday school. We weren't, you know, the children's group as it were anymore. So they were smaller. So maybe 4 to about 8, we would sit with a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
They call themselves, you know, they were cool and down with the teenagers.
Yeah.
And so they would start sort of, you know, discussions. And it was you know, intellectual. It was the big questions, you know, where do we go when we die, and what kind of life do you want to lead to go to heaven? And then they would give us sort of reading tasks. And I remember one of the questions that came up was the original sin idea, because they were basically quite anti-Catholic, although I hadn't been exposed to that religion. They were trying to dismantle some of the Catholic things. I later found out that's what they're doing. So we would have this thing in the Free Presbyterian scripture called the Catechism. Things like man's chief aim is to glorify God. So they would go through each part of that, and they would also dismantle some of the ideas from other religions. The original sin idea troubled me a little bit, because they were trying to dismantle it, yet at the same time talking about what an evil woman Eve is, and it's Eve's fault that we're all suffering the way they were. Now, unbeknownst to the mentor and the group, I was obviously becoming a young woman, and I was having a lot of issues with that, medical issues with that. So I had this tremendous guilt that, oh, I must be a bad person if God's punished me in this way to, you know, greatly increase my pains or whatever, you know, was there. So, you know, I started questioning that. I was so how come somebody that's really wicked. I don't know, they've abducted a child or something, they can have children, or, you know, I was just breaking it down to kind of almost like biological arguments, I guess. If somebody's so bad, then how can this happen? And they couldn't give me satisfactory answers. It's all part of God's plan. It's God works in mysterious ways.
Right.
Or go and read the Bible more, and it gets explained in X, Y, Z chapter. So yeah, it wasn't satisfactory. I was asking why too much, basically.
I think you touched on something deeply important there, that there's a way in certain religious ideas that if you're experiencing negative things in your life, that somehow it is your fault. So did you feel that way, and how did you figure out that it wasn't your fault? It was that these things weren't quite true.
Just reading other things that weren't the Bible, or watching things on the news. I mean, obviously the internet wasn't really a thing then.
Yeah.
Speaking to friends in school, I did martial arts as well, which they didn't like that. That was like some weird Eastern philosophy. I made the mistake one time saying that we did meditation and that, and they said, I think you should stop doing that, that will confuse you.
Wow.
Things like that. Yeah, so just being exposed to other things outside, like the church and the Bible group, and because obviously I always question, I always ask why. I've got kind of analytical mind. There's a lot of autism in a family, but I've never been tested for it.
Okay.
But yeah, and I also took sciences in school. You know, some of the teachers and certainly some of the people at the church were like, oh, take languages, take Italian, do this. I didn't. I ended up taking 3 sciences. So that's maybe kind of pushed me over into being quite analytical as well.
Interesting. Let's explore that for just a second. Because I think there's a fairly direct link between the people who kind of deconvert on their own and some correlation to their understanding of the scientific method. Because I think a core element of the scientific method is recognizing our own fallibility, that we can be wrong, that the things that we want to be true may not be true. Do you feel like that had any impact at all as you were studying science on beginning to question, say, moral beliefs or religious beliefs?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the first science classes that I was exposed to was physics. And the physics teacher was really good. He had a good impact on me. When I'm asking him questions, he was saying, oh, you should think about reading this book. And then it got me onto the Big Bang Theory and things like that. So I'm kind of looking through all of this, and this doesn't tie up with the timeline that's in Genesis. And
right.
So I'm going back asking them about that. Oh, but you don't take the 7 days as literal. It's not literally 7 days. So I'm like, okay. So I'm carrying on with the sort of physics side of things, and meanwhile on the martial arts side of things, basically the style that we were learning was Kenpo Jiu-Jitsu. So it's from Kenpo karate and also Jiu-Jitsu. So it's got a mixed Chinese and Japanese influence. So they started teaching us some kanji, just simple stuff for commands for fighting, and so it was really strange. It was a totally offhand comment, but my sensei was really proud of this scroll, and he says, oh, this is a copy from a kanji scroll that was 4,000 years old. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. It was found in this area, and it's basically it's just a kind of life philosophy. I can't even remember what it said now, to be honest, but that got me thinking. I'm like, if that's 4,000 years old, and so they had like a rudimentary writing system. They maybe didn't have martial arts in it. I don't know if that was tied to martial arts, but so that doesn't tie in with the Bible timeline at all.
Right.
So why has God not appeared to these guys over here that could read and write? And obviously, since I've got older, I've saw a lot of YouTube videos with this very same idea, that why did the revealed truth, appear in the Middle East within a really small circle?
Right.
So I went back to the Sunday school and I kind of asked them about that, and they're like, well, read the Bible and basically it spreads out to all man. I'm like, okay, yeah, but this is based in Jerusalem, Nazareth, etc., etc. So what about the rest of the world? And what about the flood? Was that worldwide? And
Right.
so it just kind of snowballed from there. I was coming back every week, annoying them with why is fuels and what about the dinosaurs? Why is that not mentioned in the flood story and things like that? So yeah, it definitely it lit a spark, I think.
Interesting. I do think that just asking questions alone starts one down that path, and clearly that was the case for you. So yeah, that's interesting. Did you ever feel guilty for doubting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I kind of left between 16 and 18. I was here and there, and when I was 18 I left, but I went away to uni, which probably helped a lot as well, but I was still expected to go to the church in Aberdeen, and I put in a couple of appearances, but when I would go back they'd be like, oh, so and so in that congregation said that you hadn't been, and I'd be like, well, I've been busy with my uni work, which was kind of true, but yeah, I felt really guilty. I was like, what am I doing here? Why is this happening almost?
Right.
Why can't I just believe? Why can't I just be a good girl? All that sort of stuff. I felt a tremendous sense of guilt, because it was like this before you were kind of peaceful, and then when you start to question too much and you see things that are going on, then I don't know, you just get this horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach that something's not right here at all.
Right.
And it takes a while to let it go. You do really feel guilty, I think, for a long time.
I think that's incredibly common for those of us who have gone through this experience. So yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
That's all right.
What would you say that you've gained since deconversion, and are there any things that you feel like you've lost after deconversion?
I don't think I've lost anything.
Okay.
If I've lost people or I've lost relationships with certain family members, then I think it's their loss than mine, because they just weren't nice people. And if they can't accept me for who I am, I'm not a terrible person. I've gained loads of different friendships, loads of different experiences that I might not have had if I'd stayed in the church. I've gained probably more of a tolerance, because pre-Presbyterian church, they weren't very tolerant of difference at all. You couldn't be gay. I'm not gay, but I'm an ally, obviously. So I've got gay friends now that I wouldn't have had I stayed in the church. Certainly people of colour as well, And the thing is, they're so almost two-faced with the people of colour, because clearly they recognise now that there's things in the law that's going to protect people of colour. So it's all whisper campaigns behind people's back. Oh, well, it's all right, we don't live in the same street, or things like that. With people that are gay, they're a little bit more open, the church still. Free church, really, they don't want to have equal marriage or things like that. So certainly I've lost all that things, and that's fine by me, because that's just not a good way to live. But I've gained a real curiosity for the world around me, and I'm scared of dying, but I quite like living. So I've gained a new appreciation for life. It's like you're not waiting for this happy ever after. You've got your happy ever after now, so you make the best of what you can. Right,
and fear of death is a completely rational thing for a human being to feel. So yeah, I think I hear you. I want to comment on two things. One, I feel like, do you feel a sense of freedom to love and care for people, say the LGBT community or people of color, that you felt limited to prior to deconversion? I guess what I want to explore is, I think, we don't change dramatically who we are as a person. We're still the same people, and yet I personally felt like all this freedom afterwards and I had felt constrained prior to that. Is that something that strikes a chord with you as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Don't speak to that person. They're not right. Look at that person with tattoos. They're a bad person. That person of color, they're not equal to me. So it was all little things. It was nothing, really, really bad. If it was nothing that they would probably get locked up for, but it was all whisper campaigns. They're different. Don't be friends with those type of people. The Bible class, weirdly, was more so, or maybe I didn't notice it when I was a younger child, but when we were in the small study groups and when we'd have exchange students in the school and things like that. So there was one boy, black guy, younger than us, mother's Christian, didn't want him in our study group because he wasn't the same as us.
Wow.
I found that, I was like, what, but he's a Christian? Yeah, but he's a different kind of Christian. So, I didn't sort of comprehend with me. My mum said it was always quite a kind wee child, like if I seen an injured animal or something like that. So, yeah, what you said there about you don't really change as a person, I just got a bit more switched on to how other people weren't kind to folk around them and that. So,
right,
definitely a freedom, because nobody can tell me now who I can be friends with. I think there's one of the guys that I used to work with going on about 7% of communication is verbal, so all the other things are non-verbal cues. So I would get, obviously when I was a kid, be tuned in, have a little bit of empathy for people, and then I was told what you're feeling there is wrong, or don't welcome that person in. But now I'm free to, if I like the person, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if they've got a face full of piercings or they're full of tattoos. So I've got quite a wide and varied circle of friends. So I think this is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Yeah. The other point I wanted to touch base again on is the believers in your life. So whether that's family or friends, do you still have relationships with them? And how's that going? How have you managed the relationships with the people that still believe?
Yeah, just more at arm's length, I guess. I completely fell out with my dad's sister. She joined the Baptist church, and we went. She now stays in Australia, and we went over to stay with them. And my dad was like, "Be careful there." And I'm asking him, "Oh, why?" Well, she can be a little bit selfish, so watch out there. So we went over to Australia, stayed with them probably about 3 weeks in total, and it was horrendous. We went to the church. We really tried hard. We got on with people at our church and everything. And I don't know, we weren't cleaning up quick enough. We weren't sitting in the right place. We weren't, taking the bin in. It was all little strange things that she was doing, and it was nothing to do with the church. It was her as a person. So, but the religion thing was used as an excuse. So that sister, we're not in contact with at all. But there's other aunties and uncles that are arm's length. So if there's a family gathering, more often than not, funerals now, it's all very polite. It's okay, but there's no other contact. It's just really kind of more of an acquaintance. And a lot of the little cousins are not very churchy, and they're all on Facebook, so I maintain quite a lot of contact with their sons and daughters and things like that. So yeah, I guess the generation just slightly older than me, they're all pretty estranged now. When I first got together with my husband, my then partner, we lived together for probably 5 years or something. And then when we got engaged, they said, oh, that's great. So you're going to get married now. You won't be living in mortal sin anymore. I was like laughed, but it wasn't a joke with family. So, So I don't need stuff like that. I won't maintain the relationships in any kind of meaningful sense, but I'll certainly never be rude or anything to them if I see them in a social setting.
I find that is one of the great ironies of deconversion, is that we wind up having to be the bigger people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, you have to show a level of compassion and patience with people that they can't possibly comprehend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they
If there
think
was,
they're better than you because of God.
right, right. Yeah.
You know.
If there was a way for you to let them know, what's the one thing you wish they could understand about you as you are today?
I'm still me. I'm not any different. I haven't changed at all. I always questioned. They know that. I was always the little kid who was like, "Oh, but why? But why?" So it's nothing to do with that book. But they can't understand that, because if you don't have God in your life, you're not a good person anymore. And they obviously have their own ideas about that. I can't begin to say what they're thinking. I mean, obviously living in mortal sin, but I'm not even going to speculate what gets said behind people's backs. My brother's even more kind of forthright, I guess. I mean, he's like got Hitchens posters.
Yeah.
You know, he sort of puts things on Facebook. I never put stuff on Facebook to do with religion. It's just, I don't know. I use Twitter for that, because I guess some of the older generation are not on Twitter. But my brother's not scared. He's quite happy to upset people and stuff. So, yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we're both as.
They're both what? I'm sorry?
We're both still as. Even, you know, my brother's the same. He's always been quite in your face, but he's clever. I mean, he's more eloquent than I am.
Well, your story so far has been quite eloquent, so I wouldn't. So now, how do you determine what things are true? What's the process you go through to determine if something is true or not?
What source it's come from? Is it repeatable? You know, I'll not just click on some link on Facebook. I want to see it from somewhere else, a source that I would respect, and it tends to be, you know, if it's a scientific story, then I'm not going to just look at one study. Look what happened with the autism study and why we've got all these anti-vaxxers now. Yeah, if it can be demonstrated and repeated, I mean, obviously that's just the scientific method, you know, that's school stuff. But I have my favourite websites that I go to. I have my favourite programmes on TV that I watch. David Attenborough, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brian Cox, all that sort of things. So yeah, I don't just take things at face value. I mean, you know, you see some news stories and you think, maybe it's on the BBC, so it's correct, but you know, they don't always get it right either. So I think I'm just quite analytical with what I'm taking in now, as opposed to reading one book.
Right. Yeah, multiple sources.
Yeah.
All right, Susan, I asked you earlier if it would be okay if we did a round of devil's advocate questions. So I'm going to pretend I'm the angry believer in your life, and I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 hard questions here.
Okay.
So isn't it that you just wanted to be free to sin?
Well, what sin do you think I want to do particularly?
Yeah.
Murder, adultery. I mean, I'm not really sure where that one comes from.
Right.
And define what a sin is. Is it one of the 10 commandments? Or I think I would just throw it back to them.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Is it that you're just mad at God?
How can you be mad at something that doesn't exist?
Good point. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is it possible that you weren't a strong enough believer? That you didn't try hard enough?
Oh no, I tried. My knees were sore praying.
Yeah.
I would go to sleep crying because I thought I'd done something wrong. I really tried. And I tried to get help, and I tried the mentors and the Sunday school teachers and the elders in the church, tried to get help from them, and I was just told to read more. And when I read more of the book, then that's what you'll see. When you read more, you believe less.
Interesting. Good point. Yeah. You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that you were comparing like what you understood about the cosmos with the timeline in the Old Testament, and that others had told you, well, that's just figurative. Did you ever make a decision to not go down the liberal theology direction, to just say, it's just all metaphorical, and why throw the baby out with the bathwater is the question?
Well, it was kind of a two-part thing. It was first of all asking about the timeline and then saying, it's just a metaphor. But then there was a sermon just after that said on the first day, and I think it's the second day, and there was night and day, and then the second day there was light. I can't remember now because I haven't read the Bible for a while, but when I asked that question again, I was told yes, and it was the second day, but then thereafter, then the day doesn't mean a day. And I went, I'm not being funny here, but do you not have to have light to have a day? So how could there be a day already when there wasn't light?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, just silly things like that that just kept me going. Then it's like, all right, I'll just take it as face value. Yeah, it's just a metaphor, and the pillars of salt are also a metaphor, and all the horrible stories, Sodom and Gomorrah, is also a metaphor. I didn't buy it. I'm sorry. Once that spark had kind of been ignited, I just didn't buy it anymore. I wasn't getting satisfactory answers.
Interesting. One more devil's advocate question. Without God, how can you be moral or have a sense of purpose in your life?
I actually got asked that from the sister that we don't speak anymore, and I said, well, I'd put that back to you, that if the only thing stopping you being amoral, then you're a psychopath, basically. And at that point, I'd been at uni and I did sports science, nothing fancy, but we did do psychology, and we covered a bit about I can't speak, psychotherapy. Anyway, so because in sporting terms, there's quite a lot of psychopaths who do well at certain sports because of their singular aspect. So we kind of touched on that side of things, and she said to me, she was like, well, without God, what's to stop you doing X, Y, or Z? And I was like, so you wouldn't do X, Y, or Z because you think God's watching you? Then that's horrible. I don't need a God to say that's not a nice thing to do. And she was pretty taken aback by that, to be honest.
Interesting. I was struck by your story as well, being a young person and having empathy for the people around you and recognizing the lack of empathy in the believers around you. So even as a child, you were making a moral observation about your belief system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've pretty much always done that. Sometimes it's been to my detriment because I've maybe had, well, I don't know if you can have too much empathy, but I've been a bit of a pushover with people. And I'm not saying all the believers in the church were like that too, but there certainly was more than enough to kind of ring alarm bells with me.
Interesting. So out of the devil advocate role, so for today, are there people in your life? Is there a community that you have that is explicitly secular that helps as a support group, let's say?
On Twitter a little bit, but in real life it's probably like we as a couple, myself and my husband, pub quiz quite a lot, and a lot of people that go there are non-religious, and we've got non-religious friends. We've met people we're shareholders in a pub which will remain nameless because we don't want to give them a free advert.
Right.
But they have big AGMs up in Aberdeen, so we sometimes go to pub quizzes with a lot of friends abroad, Canada, things like that we've met through that. And yeah, more often than not, 99 times out of 100, they've not got any religious kind of persuasion at all. They're pretty much humanists. So we've met a lot of them in real life, but obviously some of them are on Twitter and that as well.
Okay. Was there a particular resource, like either that started you to question, or like you mentioned in your 20s, going back and forth, a book, YouTube, anything in particular that you can point to as saying, was valuable to you in the deconversion process?
Probably the scientific textbooks that my physics teacher gave me when I was a kid, 16, maybe 15, 16. A lot of that stuff with the Big Bang Theory. I mean, I forget the names of some of these. Later on, when I'm at uni, I'm picking up, obviously, works by Bertrand Russell and things like that. And then, so once you're doing that, then leads on to sort of Hitchens, Hawking, Dawkins a little bit as well. Really quite like Hitchens. I mean, he's the polar opposite to how I am. I'm kind of quite reserved, and he's very vociferous in his arguments and very singular in his pursuit of the truth. So I think it's just been a snowball from like scientific textbooks trying to explain certain physics theories to where I am today.
If you could talk to people who are either currently going through some doubts or have just realized that they no longer believe, what kind of advice would you give them?
Just hang in there. There's plenty of people that you can get in touch with. It's just your brain kicking in. You've been told not to use it. I can't remember who said, was it, I don't know, Ricky Gervais or something. It's like, I've got a brain, I used it, and now I'm an atheist. Isn't that ironic, sort of thing? I'm paraphrasing, obviously,
right.
You're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel confused. You're going to feel conflicted, but just hang in there. There's plenty of people out there. You're not alone. And certainly now with the social media the way it is, you can reach out on Twitter. There's lots of other places in the real world. Join the Humanist Society in whatever country you're in, and they can put you in touch with support groups and things like that as well.
All right. Susan, before we wrap up, I just want to make sure if there's any topic or question that I haven't asked. Is there anything else you want to tell the listeners?
Probably not.
No worries. Susan, I appreciate your time. I thank you so much. I think, again, each one of us that tells our story has an impact on the people who hear it. And I think you've been quite eloquent. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
A few final thoughts on today's episode. I hope you found Susan's story as inspiring as I did. And if you are in the midst of your doubts or on your way to deconversion, I hope it gives you some hope to hear from someone who has gone through the process and come out on the other side. A few things stand out about Susan's story. Her being as young as she was when she began to recognize a moral argument against the faith that she grew up with, recognizing that she had empathy for people that were different from herself in a way that the people around her did not. Another thing that's interesting is just the intellectual curiosity. I find that one of the things that leads people to deconversion is dissatisfaction with the pat answers, and I think Susan's story exemplifies that. Lastly, even after 20 years, Susan has people in her life who look at her askance because of her atheism. Part of the purpose of this podcast is also to have those listeners who are believers get to hear the stories of people who have deconverted and understand those of us who no longer have faith. I want to thank Susan again for coming on the podcast to tell her story. Not only does she provide some hope for those who might be in the midst of their doubts or the early parts of deconversion, but also she exemplifies what it means to be compassionate, kind, and a good human being. Thanks again, Susan. If you're interested in telling your story, please get in touch with me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com or on Twitter at gracefulatheist. Time for some footnotes. The song is a track called Waves by Makaih Beats. Please check out her music. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to help support the podcast, here are the ways you can go about that. First, help promote it. The podcast's audience grows by word of mouth. If you found it useful or just entertaining, please pass it on to your friends and family. Post about it on social media so that others can find it. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. This will help raise the visibility of our show. Join me on the podcast. Tell your story. Have you gone through a faith transition? You want to tell that to the world? Let me know and let's have you on. Do you know someone who needs to tell their story? Let them know. Do you have criticisms about atheism or humanism, but you're willing to have an honesty contest with me? Come on the show. If you have a book or a blog that you want to promote, I'd like to hear from you. Also, you can contribute technical support. If you are good at graphic design, sound engineering, or marketing, please let me know and I'll let you know how you can participate. And finally, financial support. There will be a link on the show notes to allow contributions which would help defray the cost of producing the show. If you want to get in touch with me, you can Google Graceful Atheist, or you can send email to gracefulatheist@gmail.com. You can tweet at me at gracefulatheist, or you can just check out my website at gracefulatheist.wordpress.com. Get in touch and let me know if you appreciate the podcast. Well, this has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Grab somebody you love and tell them how much they mean to you. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.